Welcome back to Gamer in the Wardrobe. Hopefully you clicked on this thumbnail because you were interested in Alpha Clash and maybe learning a new contender. We're going to take a stroll down set 4 Kilimanjaro Power Erupting. We're going to take a stroll down that street. I threw together a deck. I've tested it a couple of times. It's pretty fun. It could probably be optimized, but it's at least a good starting point if you want to try them out, test them out, and go from there. So Kilimanjaro, we'll go over the contender really quickly, and then we'll hop into the deck list. The contender himself is a 25 health alpha contender with 1 attack and 0 defense. Kilimanjaro Power Erupting has at 25 trigger attack. You may draw 1 card, then discard 1 card. If the discarded card is a clash card, or if you discard a clash card this way, this contender gets +1/+0 until the end of turn. So basically, if you swing, draw a card, and discard a clash card from that ability, he becomes a 2/0. As you could likely tell, Kilimanjaro is going to be relatively aggressive because he wants to swing and draw and swing and draw and discard and swing and draw, right? Now, the other unique thing is when you swing and draw, you're going to take some damage. So at the start of your turn, if you're below 15 health, Magnitude is a new key term or a new keyword in set 4. And what Magnitude is Magnitude is X, where X is equal to the number of cards in your Oblivion. So if you have 10 cards in your Oblivion, that's Magnitude 10. Magnitude 15 is 15 in Oblivion. 20 Magnitude is 20 in Oblivion. So a lot of times by turn 4 or 5, you can be below 15 health, but the struggle is trying to get 10 discarded cards or discarding 10 cards or having 10 cards in your Oblivion. So this deck does a relatively good job with that. I tended to have at least my Magnitude 10 and sometimes Magnitude 15 firing off, and it definitely does make a difference. So that said, let's hop into the actual deck itself. I'm going to go over the clash cards first because I think that's what most people are excited about. And this one's going to be kind of interesting. It's a 3-color green, white, black death, and it features 6 bound cards plus Clarity Harbinger. The idea around this is most people are only running like 1 or 2 bound, and if they get the second bound in their hand, but they already have it resourced, they can't resource it. So then it just kind of sits in their hand and they play it if it's convenient. Well, with Kilimanjaro, what you can do is you're obviously seeking these bound cards to resource them, but if you hypothetically draw one and you already have one resourced, well, the contender ability functions really well with bound cards because you can swing, draw a card, and discard the bound card you cannot use because you don't want to resource it because you already have one in the resource. So I found that a really fun option where if I already had, let's say, Koggin in my resource zone, I'd swing with my contender, I'd draw a card, let's say it's another bound Koggin, I would just discard that card to give my contender the 2/0 buff. So really fun way to not only search through your deck, but have an additional use for these bound cards outside of just being resources. And then the Clarity Harbinger is our Unrivaled card. I think it's just a really fun card with how this deck functions, especially if you look at the Unrivaled. I believe white has the Unrivaled Clarify, which isn't going to be good for this deck, and green has the Unrivaled Magnate, which isn't going to be good for this deck. So Clarity just kind of slaughters itself in really nicely into this deck. It's a very strong card. It has very strong effects, and it just is a good card to have in the deck. That brings us to the 4-drop Warcry Faithful Protector. We call this the Buffalo. He is a very strong card, which is why he made this list. Ultimately, he's exclusive, meaning you can only have 1 of him on the field at a time. So exclusive is why we're running 3 of them instead of 4. And his stats are good. He's a 3/4, 4 for 2 white, which getting the resource game isn't very challenging with this deck because of all the bound opportunities you have. But engaged clash cards you control get +0/+1, which is really strong with an aggressive deck, getting that additional defense whenever you decide to swing. So ultimately you play him out, you leave him standing because of his second ability, which is counterattack. After an opponent declares an attack, you may exhaust this card. If you do, prevent all clash damage target attacking clash card would deal this turn. And when you exhaust him, he actually becomes a 3/5 because he now is an engaged clash card. Until the end of your next turn, that clash card is -X/-S, where X is that card's initial resource cost. So, for instance, now I want to be very clear too, it's until the end of your next turn. It's like if this effect doesn't kill that card is still engaged because it's swung and has the -X/-X stat buff on your turn, which gives you the opportunity to kill it. So, for instance, let's say trying to think of an example here. Now, what you can see is most of these cards are going to die from that effect. But let's just say this Kilimanjaro decides to swing, and you decide to exhaust it. It now becomes a -1/1 stat line and doesn't deal any combat damage. So the Buffalo is a really, really strong card. It made the list just because it's a strong card. It's also an alpha. So a lot of these cards, what you'll notice, are alpha cards because the contender ability at magnitude 20, black alpha clash cards get +1/+1. But also we're going to be running New York City because of the alpha synergy, which is a very, very strong card in this deck. So that brings me to Sonoro. Very good card. It's a 5-drop, 3 green pip. Again, I didn't really have any trouble getting the pips I needed with this deck because I was always able to search through my deck with my contender ability and find those bound cards, which really enables you to hit a lot of the curve that you're doing. And his ability is when he trigger attacks, he becomes a 5/4 and draws you a card. If the Buffalo's on the field, he becomes a 5/5. So really, really strong card in this deck, really like it, and it gives you an additional draw as well as some aggressive swings on your turn 5. This is a new card from set 4, Shadowlight Recovering. It made the list because A, I wanted to test it, B, it's an alpha, and C, it's just kind of a cool card. Recovery is also a new keyword in this set where whenever that clash card deals clash damage, your contender gains 1 health. So there was a couple of situations where I'd have 2 or 3 clash cards on board. I would play this Shadowlight out of my hand, swing with it, and when I trigger attack, my other alpha clash cards get recovery 1. So I can swing with them, put on the pressure as a 5/5 or a 5/6 if the Buffalo's on board, or potentially as a 7/6 if the Buffalo's on board and New York City's on board. It also would gain flight and +2/+2, making it a 7/6, right? So I swing with this, pretty aggressive on turn 5, which is really nice, but then the other 3 or 4 clash cards I have on the board, also when I swing with them, I gain health back. So one of the unique things about this deck is there was, in a weird way, a lot of health recovery, which I actually was not intending to do, but it actually was a nice little happy surprise, because A, the contender himself at magnitude 10 under 15 health gains a health on the start of his turn, but also this will gain health, and then on top of that, the Clarity Unrivaled has a when a card is sent to Oblivion or defeated, you can gain 2 health. So in a weird way, I didn't build this to gain health, but I found myself gradually gaining health, which made my aggressive play that much more satisfying because I could be aggressive and then know that I'm going to gain 2 or 3 or 4 health later on in the game with some of these card synergies. That brings us to Magnate the Tyrant. He is a 5/3 flyer alpha, and he can, on trigger enter, send an accessory to Oblivion. If you do that, then all other alpha clash cards you control get +1/+0. So again, really strong with New York City, really strong with alphas, really good accessory removal, really, really great card. And again, he's a 3 green pit, which most of the time you're not going to have a trouble getting to. Lone Fighter is a nice bomb at the end of the game. Let's say they board wipe you, they boom you, they find a way to get rid of most of your cards. You can then just play out Magnate Lone Fighter, and he's an 8/8 with flight. With New York City on board, he's a 10/8 with flight. So that's a pretty big swing that's going to be hard to stop, especially if they just use all of these resources to get rid of the rest of your cards. The Kilimanjaro 2-drop Interception is a nice little card. It's a blocker. It's a 3/3 with New York City. It's a 4/4 if your magnitude is 20 and under 15 health. So just a really, really nice card. Tough to get rid of early game. Benefits from the Buffalo, benefits from other things like Grant Park, which your opponent may play. So this is just kind of like a turn 2, get it out there, have it block, have it be kind of cheeky, take some damage card. The next card, this one is really cool with this deck because we're discarding a lot of stuff. Full transparency, if you get this on board, your opponent's likely to remove it because it is that big of a threat. With Molten Crag discarding cards and drawing cards, with your Contender discarding cards and drawing cards, with your Clash buff discarding cards and drawing cards, this card can get very big very, very quickly. I think at one point I had him at an 8/8 on one of my turns. And ultimately, whenever you discard a card, this card gets +1/+1. It is 2 black pips, which again, isn't challenging to get 1 out, but if you try to get 2 out, it can be potentially a little bit more challenging. Really good synergy with the deck with the discard capabilities of it. Brings us to the 1-drop Haven, just a nice little player out, draw a card. And then the Pestilence is kind of fun here too, because it can benefit a couple of things. If the portal is closed and you have Kilimanjaro harnessing power on board, you can discard a card, -2/-2 something on their end, and then this card gets buffed. If Molten Crag is on board and you discard a card, you draw a card. So I'd probably run maybe 1 or 2, or maybe 1 more of him and maybe take something else out. But again, in the first couple of games with this, it did what I wanted to do. When I found Pestilence, it was refreshing. It didn't feel bulky. It didn't feel like I had to open the portal, which was kind of nice. So those are the Clash cards. Accessories, we have Moxie Sharpshooter, really good turn 1 play. Really good just to have on the board for the first 2 or 3 or even 4 turns. Came in very, very clutch endgame when they're trying to play out, I played a Coggin where they played out the Moxie 3/1 that could search. I got to zap that with Moxie Sharpshooter. I got to zap some Havens. I got to zap some Ramp Havens. So everyone knows Moxie Sharpshooter is a good card. I run 3 of them. This is a new card from set 4 as well. This is the Plague Bearer's Embrace. And this is just getting your opponent to either basically send their card to Oblivion or discard 2 cards to negate this effect. So it's a trap, it's expensive, but there are some times where, they're going on to turn 6, they have 4 green on the board, or 4 green resources and a black, and you are assuming Coggin, Lone Fighter, maybe they're playing red and you're thinking the second Horseman's going to come out. This is a really strong card to either get them to commit to the Clash card by discarding 2 cards, or just sending that card straight to Oblivion. In one of the circumstances, my opponent only had 1 card in his hand, and he played a bomb and had to send it to Oblivion because he could not discard 2 cards to negate the effect, inevitably winning you the game. It is strategic. You want to make sure you're doing it at the right time, because there are situations where you have it there and they don't do anything, and then you just didn't spend 3 resources on your turn. So you want to put these in situations where your opponent is most likely needing to play something that is high resource value that you can target. Brings us to our actions. Deliverance is just automatic 3-cost, 2 white pip removal. Send target Clash card to Oblivion. Great for removing blockers, removing big threats, and you don't have to worry about it because they don't get triggered defeats or anything like that. I will do the Clash Ground before we go into Under Pressure. New York City, you draw a card. Alpha Clash cards get +2 attack and flight. So +2 attack and flight in this deck. Now, even if my opponent is playing Alpha cards, I'm not too worried about that because this deck was built around Alpha cards. So I'm going to outpace them. Yes, your opponent may get an advantage from this. Yes, it may hurt when they swing, but if they swing, you have enough resources and Alpha cards to get rid of that and do some pretty heavy damage the next turn. So Alpha Clash cards get +2 in flight. Trigger enter, you draw 1 card. For 3 with 2 green pips. So very good card. The last 2 I want to talk about is Molten Crag. This is a new card from set 4. Trigger enter, discard 1 card, then put up to one target clash card with an initial resource cost of 3 or less from your Oblivion into your hand. Then whenever a player discards 1 or more cards, if there are 10 or more cards in your Oblivion, they draw 1 card. So I found this synergy really good. A, it helps me build up my Oblivion to get to my magnitude. B, I can seek out this Kilimanjaro if it was killed or if I discarded it with my contender, knowing that I'm going to play Molten Crag and pull it back out. So there was some good synergies, and then as I'm discarding cards later on with, maybe my contender, Under Pressure, Pestilence, I'm not only discarding these, but I'm getting to draw them once I get to magnitude 10. So really good card to draw a lot of cards. I think at one point I drew like 6 cards in a turn, which was kind of cool. I think I actually lost that game, but I still did it, which is fun. And then the last one, again, with the card draw we're going to talk about is Under Pressure. This is your Clash buff. Can only be played with a black contender. It's 1 resource, 1 black resource, and then it reads, you may only play this card if your contender is black. You may discard 1 card, again, working with Molten Crag, working with the Kilimanjaro harnessing power, working with a lot of the synergies we have. You may discard 1 card. If you do, draw 2 cards. Amazing ability, because you're giving up 1 to gain 2 and getting a +1/+1 on your contender. Now, the chef's kiss to this is if you have magnitude 15, meaning 15 cards in your Oblivion, your contender or clash card actually gets +2/+2 until the end of the turn. Now, another fun thing with this is it can be contender or clash card, which is extremely strong. I know one of the cards that I hate and love from this set is Dragonheart. It's a +2/+2 green alpha clash buff, and you can look through whatever. You guys know the card, go look it up. But I hate that card. But one of the cool things about that card, or one of the Achilles heels about that card, is it can only target your contender. Under Pressure can do contender or clash cards. So this is one of my favorite cards in this set, favorite cards for this contender. And that is the deck list. So let me kind of zoom out a little bit, maybe give you more of an overview. Kilimanjaro, here's the clash cards, here's the accessories, and here's the actions and clash grounds. And give me your thoughts. I appreciate any feedback, and thank you guys for watching. We'll see you next time.